Today, I would like to read you a story from my book. My name is Pauline Crawford-Omps. My book is Magical Conversations. And my passion is for men and women to live a delightful, harmonious, balanced life. You see in the background a picture on the wall of my parents. My mother and father, married for 62 years, always in love. Not always straightforward. Relationships never are. But they taught me a great lesson in understanding human nature. They gave me a fantastic environment to grow up in as a young girl, and for me to express myself as the tomboy I was and still am. So here I am, coming up to 70 in May, and considering my silver years, my silver hair, my silver times. And I have a great passion and determination to help men and women understand each other at all levels of life, especially in business, especially in a world that is needing our togetherness, our collaboration to inspire amazing, sustainable, creative industries to emerge. And is that happening? Has the magic gone out of our relationships now that women have gone into the workplace? Maybe. In my study, I have found an enormous difference between men and women. Yes, like Dr. John Gray wrote in Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus, but what has changed in our time since he wrote that book is that women have entered the marketplace in droves. And we want to be in those senior roles, in those top roles, in those C-suites at the executive level. And we also want to maintain our home life, our family life, our care of our children and our parents, of our loved ones. Do we want it all? Do we want too much? Are men disappearing out of sight because they're confused? I've interviewed now coming up to 40 men across the world, and all of them start by saying that life for men is confusing. And what is confusing? Is it that we just don't value our differences and that we've become so enamored of heading to gender balance and gender equality that we've forgotten that as two different natures, men and women are different? And there are other differences that come into play. There's the whole generational differences, cultural differences, LGBT differences. There are different values in the millennium generation than there are in the baby boomer period of my life. But come down to basics, men are men and women are women. And for all the other variables, that core driver has yet to be understood. I always say, and I will say it now, our differences are what make us magically beautiful, and how we come together is important. But our differences, if they are seen as difficulties, become unbearable obstacles. We make assumptions about each other, we make judgments, we get angry, we get frustrated, we get irritated because somebody doesn't understand us. What is going on? Now it's time to talk, and I promised you a story. So here's my story. It's my metaphor to help us understand maybe what's going on. So sit back and listen as I tell you a story. It's called Bears and Birds. Who's in charge? A magical story of changing times. And I say here, in the search for a new understanding and a magical conversation between men and women, let's take an oblique perspective and a story of many new possibilities using the unlikely metaphor of bears, brackets men, and birds, brackets women, to tackle a challenged business world and economic chaos we might see today. Maybe there are two different cultures merging rapidly, two natures, one vision, I hope. Maybe this story is not so unlikely. So take a seat and listen. Once upon a time, the business city had been built over many decades on the square mile principle. Every inch was measurable and maximized for the owners. Each square inch sold and resold, marked up, traded down. Every skyscraper fielded a magnificent view, yet many streets were cold from the deep shadows the towers made. The inner cities were paved with gold, and a labyrinth of tunnel journeys and caves connected by long corridors, lift shafts, and stairs. And out of this, a very hard-nosed culture had grown. This city was inhabited by the bears. There was another city, known more as a community, hidden away over those past decades. This was designed to be a community culture with open landscape, cozy rooms, and playstations for the younger members to learn and flourish, nesting nooks for conversations, space for innovation and creativity, lovely coffee breaks. Here there were support systems that shared resources and reduced waste. This inner city was a mesh of interconnected live wires and treetop nests. This inner community was inhabited by the birds. The birds and the bears were well known to each other as they had shared the earth together for millenniums, breathing the same air, drinking the same water, eating from the same resources. However, they needed different things. They had different biological needs. And even though they often held similar aspirations and dreams for their future, their perspectives on how that came to be were subtly different. Their challenge was to understand each other as the two cities grew side by side, and business and life began to interweave. Over the last decades, where viral changes, technology, and flexible ways of working and living have become blended in style, some top-level bears observed where world was changing, and surrounding market and social boundaries were collapsing, evolving, and revolving in ever-decreasing circles. Many natural and economic disasters challenged the very foundation of the world that both the bears and the birds loved. They now faced a world in crisis and obstacles that threatened to undermine life as previously known. The bears continued to prowl their city. Some were gruff, grisly, and dangerous. Some were strong and proud of their mighty presence. Others were young cub bears who were learning from their elders. Some were afraid of their own shadows, and yet many acted like teddy bears, warm and cuddly, keen to protect and nurture their young. Now the birds were very different to the bears. Many variable types with plumes of many colored feathers, bodies of different sizes and wingspans to spread, to glide and soar, big and small, wild and tame. Some flew in formation, others lived as family units, others fought their own battles, while many twittered happily over the garden wall. They all sang beautiful and creative songs. However, once they were attacked, damaged, or caught on the ground or attacked by the bears, the birds were terrified. Losing a limb, a wing, or a feather made them victims. Some birds learned to adapt to business and became even terrifying to the bears. They swooped and soared, they preyed on the most vulnerable. The cub bear often headed for the caves when he saw a vicious bird coming. Many birds sang from their hearts and were full of the sweet evening song of common sense. The sound of their voices infiltrated the airwaves of business and life as they traveled to and from work and home, as home was very precious to them. And they grew in numbers as the scent of financial independence made them flutter and flourish. Increasingly, the bears started invading the bears' city. The birds started invading the bears' city, where the bears had regularly inhabited for their daily work, seeking bigger worms and prospects for their life survival. The birds realized they were rich pickings for them. It was tough going for the birds to begin with, as the bears were big and strong. They had built their city to be the powerhouse that generated wealth and provided resources for their own caves. Their traditions were well embedded in their mindset. They liked to come home to that home nesting birds. They didn't always approve of working birds. They made it a perilous journey for many working birds who tried to perch on the highest levels of the skyscrapers, looking for safe habitats and life-saving perches. Many bears didn't want the birds to get into their workspaces and high-rise, hard-earned stakes. However, the birds were very determined that they were there to stay, and they grew in numbers every year. The more conscious, wise birds and bears knew that. For the survival of their species, the only way forward was together. The bears did not understand why birds talked in circles, chatted with each other, and used seemingly random tangents to think about problems. Bears thought and acted in boxes, directed in straight lines, and expected solutions to every question. The birds longed to bring their circular birdsong to be truly valued and honored by the bears as an intrinsic and valuable part of fulfilled and successful work-life balance. After all, they valued the bears for their strength, tenacity, logical thinking, and especially their ability to be the major provider for the family. The birds loved the adoration that the bears gave them at home, and in many communities they nurtured their families of young bears and birds. Once more and more birds had discovered the city that the bears had created, they wanted a bigger piece of the worm pie. They knew that they could add value, natural skills, more emotional intelligence, a good relationship management, and different consumer knowledge to that which the bears had. They knew they would deliver much of what the bears offered, yet with a nurturing, inclusive spirit that would sustain better long-term results. Combining a healthy lifestyle alongside the traditional fiscal success, that was their goal. Yet, given all that the bears knew, the bear city still stayed the way it was. The gateways to the high skyscrapers often proved difficult and had closed combination locks that barred the doors to the boardroom. So the question, my friend, is, can the bears and the birds sing a new magical conversation song together? Now, times have changed. The internet highway, global trade, business from your home, education for all, and entrepreneurship have blossomed, and the birds are flourishing too, and sing their beautiful songs and lyrics even more than ever. Their activities, especially the younger Y and X gen, and now millennium bears and birds, are creating new cultures and different perspectives that are meaningful and inclusive. Of course, some wise bears and birds are now growing together and writing tunes of collaboration with chords of perfection to soothe the noisy, chaotic world. More and more come to share the magical conversations that arise. These species from all generations want to bring a new harmonic to the service repertoire of business. But still some older, more traditional bears don't understand these songs. When they try to sing along, their deep voices threaten the very nature of the birdsong. The bears often get stuck with their macho, powwow, power groups, and warrior sports games. Some bears, though, learn to be more emotional. The bears and birds seem at odds with each other, yet there is also an intimate attraction between them. Bears and birds love each other and have done since the beginning of time. When the attraction flourishes, they form families to parent new generations of birds and bears. Indeed, they naturally complement each other. So as this story ends, it begins. Can the bears really let the birds into their city in ways that truly integrate the needs of both? Can the birds persuade the bears to get together and to create a new domain that integrates business and life, economic revival and social cohesion? Is it business bliss, boom, or bust? Will the bear growl or the bird song win? Only time will tell. The end of the story is still being written. Maybe magical conversations are the key to our future pot of gold. And there ends my story for today. But of course, it doesn't end. The question is, where do we start? What do we stop? What do we continue? And what do we start? What do we take from the past that is really valuable and make the future come to life now? I am driven to help and influence and support all who want to make this happen. So my goal is to invite you to think about the story, to understand what kind of bear you are, what kind of bird you are, what diverse other factors come into your life that make life difficult or make it blissful, make it meaningful or a misery. I, for one, am here to spread magical conversations into the male boardrooms of the world, to allow women to be present in all high levels of our worlds and at all levels of experience and existence, be it in the bedroom, the kitchen, the lounge, the boardroom, the team room, the coffee place, be it on social media or on TV. It's time to talk. For now, bless you. Have a magical day.